My name is Richard Holloway. I'm a writer and broadcaster, but back in the 1980s I was the Bishop of Edinburgh, and my letter is to Lyra. It came into the world about the same time as you, Lyra. Strange how blessings and curses can inhabit the same space at the same time. Years from now, I wonder what kind of story it will tell you about how it happened, who was to blame, and what lessons were learned by those who lived through it. One of the things that intrigued me about it while it was all happening was how we all started reaching for stories to help us live through it and interpret it. That's one of the things artists, including writers, particularly writers, are good at doing, Lyra, showing us ourselves, reflecting us back to ourselves like mirrors. That's why when we read a good story, we shake our heads and say, "That's me, that's about me." And one of the stories we reached for during the coronavirus epidemic was The Plague by Albert Camus. Written in 1947, it's the story of how people responded to an epidemic that swept through the French Algerian city of Oran. Well, in 2020, I knew they would reach for Camus before they actually did. I even knew the lines they would go for. And that was because in a previous time of pestilence, I had reached for them myself. One of the things you'll learn, Lyra, is that humans have short memories. No, that's not it either. It's more that we're not good at banking our memories so that we can draw on them when we need them, learn from them. You see, I had lived through another time of pestilence 40 years before the one that hit us in 2020. But that one didn't hit us all of a sudden like Corona. It crept up on us. It took a while to get going and get noticed. It was called AIDS, and it started kicking in about 1980. AIDS stands for Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome. Our bodies are equipped with a defense force called the immune system that fights off diseases that try to invade us. Well, back in the 1980s, doctors started noticing that among certain groups, the immune system was no longer working for them. It was letting in diseases we'd conquered years ago, conditions no living doctor had ever come across. The people it was hitting were mostly gay men and injecting drug users, and so the blame game began. They'd brought it on themselves, some shouted. It was God's way of ridding his world of undesirables, a bit like those programs we use to clean up our computers and get rid of the junk that's cluttering up the system. And that was when the doctors and nurses, who are always in the front line when these things hit us, reached for Camus. It was a doctor in New York City who first put me onto him. This was the passage the doctor referred to, and which I started using when Edinburgh was being labelled the AIDS capital of Europe in the 1980s. This is what Camus wrote. To state quite simply what we learn in times of pestilence, that there are more things to admire in men than to despise. The story could not be one of final victory. It could only be the record of what had to be done, and what assuredly would have to be done again by all who, while unable to be saints, but refusing to bow to pestilences, strive their utmost to be healers. We used those words from Camus, Lyra, and they helped us control the pestilence that stole so many beautiful lives in the 1980s. But even as I was using them, I wasn't completely agreeing with them. Sure, there are lots of things to admire in human beings. One of the things that will lift your heart when you read the history of what was happening the year you were born is how doctors and nurses and care workers and van drivers and the people who deliver the mail and empty the bins refused to bow to pestilences and strove their utmost to be healers. But not everyone, Lyra, not everyone, because the pestilence brought out the worst in us as well as the best. Some politicians used it to advance their own ambitions, scam artists to make money. Some just enjoyed scaring the hell out of us. And there were thousands of weird people who claimed it was a vast conspiracy only they knew the reasons for, usually something to do with modern technology. And that's because Camus was only half right, or right about half the human population, or about half the individual soul. We are capable of healing and heroism. We're also prone to envy and destruction. We are divided souls who do not understand their own actions. The words of Camus are best read as a prayer, Lyra, a prayer for what we might yet become, which is why I am praying them right now.